Welcome back, everyone. This is Beneath the Helmet. This is episode 99, the final chapter of season 3. I'm very grateful you're all here because this season has been something special. And one milestone that I really want to celebrate right out of the gate is that we just finished our 100th episode recording, which will be out very shortly. I want to also say a big thank you to the listeners of our podcast. Our audience grew over 668% this year, and we saw new followers to the show grow by over 55%. We also saw massive growth with shows listened to longer, shared more, and received more amazing ratings. This is very incredible for season 3, so thank you all very, very much. In season 3, we covered a wide stretch of what it means to serve in today's world. We spent time with firefighters, clinicians, researchers, leaders, storytellers, and people who have lived through both the best and the hardest parts of this job. What I appreciated the most is how every guest showed up with honesty and true vulnerability. So today I want to slow things down a little bit. I want to look back on some of the moments and insights that stayed with me, especially from episodes 72 to 98. This is our chance to honor the people who made this season meaningful and to carry forward the lessons that should come with us into season 4.
It's time to ignite your soul and unlock your full potential. Join us on Beneath the Helmet, the podcast exploring firefighters' health and wellness. Hosted by retired Fire Chief Arjuna George, our podcast is the perfect place to start your journey towards becoming the best version of yourself. So come on, let's join the conversation and find out what sets your soul on fire.
All right, to kick off season 3, I had the privilege of sitting down with retired FDNY Chief Frank Leeb, a leader in one of the busiest fire departments in the world. Frank brought something into focus that every firefighter understands, but we don't always name it: the firefighter blind spots. Those risks that we accept as part of the job without looking upstream at what cost they'll be to us years down the road. We trained hard on tactics, routines, we dialed in our skills. Yet we often miss the slow stuff: cancer risks, cardiac health, the wear and tear on our nervous system. Frank talked about practical leadership choices that protect longevity, like SCBA discipline and making health checks non-negotiable. He also reminded me that leadership isn't something you earn once. It's a muscle you start building from day one. And it shows up in trust, inclusion, and how you really treat people when nobody else is looking. My takeaway from this kickoff episode is simple: name your blind spots early, lead with intention, and treat your health like the asset that it is. This episode with Chief Leeb was the #1 listened to episode for season 3, 2025. In episode 73, I sat down with firefighter and fitness expert Zamzow, also known as Zam. What stood out is how he reframed resilience and fitness as skills we practice daily. One line that really hit hard for me was, "Sleep is a skill." He gave practical habits that actually felt like real life, including shift work. He also talked about fitness beyond the weights, mobility, recovery, and endurance. The stuff that keeps you reliable on shift and still present when you're at home. And I loved the 5 for 50 challenge and even did it myself this year with great success. A reminder that small, consistent habits stack over time. If there's one nugget to carry forward in this conversation, is sleep, movement, and recovery are not soft. They are, in fact, survival tools. In episode 74, I sat down with Keith Hanks. Keith models something we need to hear more of in this profession: courage and real conversations with vulnerability and authenticity. We talked about resilience not as bouncing back, but as actually showing up when it's hard. One point that really stayed with me is healing happens in community, not isolation. Keith also reframed advocacy in a grounded way. It's not about being loud, not about being performative. It's about honest listening, naming the hard truths, and making space for people to be real. My takeaway from this conversation was, let your presence become a safe place for others. That's resilience worth building. In episode 75, I sat down with Robert Cefoli to talk TRE, tension trauma release exercises. As a TRE provider myself, this conversation really was an essential one for me to share with you. TRE is a very practical way to help the body discharge stress that builds up in this line of work. What stood out for me in this conversation was how he described TRE as less like exercise and more like restoring safety within the nervous system. We can talk about fitness all day long, But if your nervous system never downshifts, it'll be an uphill battle. One nugget I really enjoyed was you can't outrun the stress you don't acknowledge. And teary is one of the best outlets to let your body process what the job has left behind. In episode 76, I sat down with Ryan Provencher, and we got into something every firefighter knows, that health and wellness isn't a side hustle. It's not a side project. It should be part of our day-to-day duty. Ryan brought a tactical athlete lens to the conversation that helped reframe our role and recognize the success from team sports. He shared we should train for function, build durability, and recover with intention. His message in this conversation was very clear. Your body and your mind are tools that you rely on every single day. Care for them the way you care for your gear. My takeaway from this conversation was consistency beats intensity. Stack the habits that keep you in the game for the long haul. In episode 77, I sat down with Megan Lautz to talk everything nutrition for first responders. What I loved about this was Megan cut through all the noise with this solid reframe. Food is functional. It's fuel for performance, recovery, and clarity in a job that really taxes our bodies and our brains. We talked about practical strategies like stable blood sugar, prioritizing protein, and a hydration that includes electrolytes when the work demands it. What I loved about her conversation was she mentioned fueling your body is preparedness. It's part of being ready for the next call and the next decade. In episode 78, I sat down with Alec Wons, and we talked purpose, passion, and the importance of connection in public safety. And one line really stayed with me. Purpose isn't something you find once. It's something you practice. We also talked leadership beyond rank, influence, presence, and curiosity. Showing up with questions before answers. In a job that trains decisiveness, curiosity keeps us learning and keeps our edges sharp. My takeaway from Alec is this. Practice purpose through presence and build connection that sustains you. In episode 79, I sat down with Deputy Fire Chief Scott Booth, and we talked about vulnerability as a strength, not as oversharing, not as softness, but as a tool for trust. Scott shared you can't build real trust from behind a mask. Vulnerability looks like accountability, it looks like humility, and it looks like listening before directing. My takeaway from this great conversation is when leaders show up as humans, crews can expand, they can breathe, they can grow, and teams will get stronger. In episode 80, I sat down with Battalion Fire Chief Rick Davis to talk integrity. We're not talking integrity as a buzzword, but as a daily practice. Rick said something that really landed with me. Integrity shows up in the quiet moments, the small decisions, the way you treat your partner after a tough shift. It's presence, it's observation. It's respect for the work and the people doing it. My takeaway from this conversation with Rick was lead with integrity in the small choices, and that's how trust will be built and kept. In episode 81 of season 3, I sat down with Brendan Guarino, and we got into mental visualization, not as fun mind games, but as high performance training. One line that really hit me is you don't get what you hope for, you get what you rehearse. Visualization done well will build familiarity with pressure before you ever meet it. It helps the nervous system orientate. It helps you transition from high stress back towards calm. And my takeaway from this, what you practice in your mind shapes how you show up in the moment. And that's truly training. In episode 82, we took a look into character-based leadership. I sat down with 4 great leaders from across North America talking everything character-based leadership in the fire service. I was joined by Scott Wilkinson, Robert Avsek, Tony Carrera, and James Reichard. And I love the shift I'm seeing and hearing in the fire service. The shift in mindset from what we do to who we are. Competence matters, yes, but character is what holds when the easy answers disappear. Character looks like honesty, owning mistakes, doing the right thing when it costs. My nugget from this episode is your presence matters more than your title. Character will outlast competence every single time. In episode 83, I sat down with Brendan Evans, and his story felt less like an interview and more like looking into a mirror. We talked about this transformation that we're seeing in the fire service, the slow work of reflection, integrity, and choosing growth over comfort. One idea that really stayed with me is courage isn't a moment, it's a habit. My takeaway here is change isn't something that happens to you. It's something you practice, one rep at a time. In episode 84, I talked with London Fire Brigade firefighter Ricky Nuttall. We talked about the Grenfell fire, survival, and self-leadership. This wasn't about replaying tragedy as war stories. It was more about what happens after those types of calls to us, how we carry what we've seen, and how we integrate it so it doesn't take over our entire lives. One line that really stayed with me was this: your story matters, not because it defines you, because how you tell it shapes how you will carry it. My takeaway from this great episode was your narrative doesn't have to become the anchor. With support, intention, it can actually become your path forward. In episode 85, I sat down with A.K. Dozanti to talk about burnout through a nervous system lens. Not about willpower, not about grit, but about capacity. A.K. framed burnout in a way that felt honest and practical to me. You don't think your way out of burnout, you regulate your way out of burnout. We talked about downshifting, small daily practices, and rebuilding capacity without needing a total life overhaul. My takeaway from this episode, which is a personal one for me as well, is burnout isn't a personal failure. It's physiology waving a red flag. In episode 86, I sat down with Dr. Terry Anderson to talk about competency-based leadership. And he pushed a very strong point. Leadership isn't something you are, it's something you do. We talked about many trainable leadership behaviors: communication under stress, decision-making, adaptability when plans fall apart. And one nugget that really resonates with me, and I truly feel this as well, was his reminder that soft skills are often the hardest skills. They require practice, feedback, reflection. And my takeaway from this was embrace the human skills and stay teachable at every stage of your career. In episode 87, I sat down with Justin Brunner to talk AI in firefighter wellness and training. What I really enjoyed about this was we kept it real simple in a complex tech world. But Justin made a real crucial point around AI that I totally agree with. Technology doesn't replace judgment. It can only enhance it. We talked about feedback loops, wellness data, and many, many tools that can help with pattern recognition. In episode 88, I sat down with Justin Champion, and we talked about trauma recovery and mental health in the fire service. In this honest conversation, we talked about recovery is not a destination. It's a series of intentional steps that bring the nervous system back towards balance. My takeaway with Justin was you don't heal by erasing the experience. You heal by changing your relationship to it with support. And that is self-leadership. In episode 89, I sat down with Vance Rowe to talk sobriety, healing, and the role of yoga and movement in resilience. Vance brought lived experience, not just theory, and he gave a real solid reframe that resilience isn't about hardening yourself. It's returning to center after you've been pulled out of whack. We talked about regulation, listening to the body, and building practice that supports presence. My takeaway from this episode was resilience starts where avoidance ends, and it grows only through practice. In episode 90, I sat down with firefighter Tommy Bolin, and we talked about the unseen battles, the sleepless nights, the memories that follow you home. And Tommy's message was clear. Resilience isn't about toughing it out. It's processing what you've carried so it doesn't keep living in your body. My takeaway was connection and honest conversations. It's not weak. It's all part of recovery. In episode 91, I sat down with Dr. Stephanie Kahn to talk about peer support and mental health. Stephanie shares we heal in the presence of other people, not in isolation. Peer support works when it becomes the culture, not just a program, not just a checkbox, but true culture. And one nugget that I really loved was her reminder that peer support isn't about fixing people. It's simply about showing up without judgment. My takeaway from this conversation was reach out earlier than you think you need to. In episode 92, I sat down with Mark Hill and we got into station level leadership. The day-to-day, the routines, the small moments that shape our culture. Mark's reminder was pretty simple. Leadership starts with how you show up before anyone else walks through the door. It's not about rank, it's reliability, it's character. And my takeaway from this conversation was leadership isn't what you say you value. It's what you practice when it's inconvenient. In episode 93, I sat down with Doug Allen and we went deep into the nervous system. A lot of what we struggle with isn't a thinking problem. It's a nervous system problem. And Doug's message really resonated with me. You can't think your way out of stress that lives below the conscious thought. We talked about how the body holds experience and why regulation tools really matter. Breath, movement, grounding. My takeaway was healing only happens when we work with the body, not against it. In episode 94, I sat down with Captain John Vogt to talk recovery, sleep, and CBD. It was a much needed conversation around exploring CBD responsibly. John's message was pretty clear. Sleep isn't a luxury, it's a foundation to wellness. We also talked about the safety and testing as non-negotiables around CBD. Because in this job, recovery tools must protect your career, never threaten it. My takeaway here was challenge the stigma with curiosity and lead wellness proactively. In episode 95, I sat down with Dr. Nolan Bicey to talk cognitive resilience, brain health, decision-making under stress, staying sharp across your whole career. He reframed it pretty clearly. It all comes down to capacity, and capacity needs protection, sleep, recovery, attention to habits, and pacing yourself. My takeaway from this conversation was your brain isn't on your side when it's exhausted, so protect it like your career depends on it, because it really does. In episode 96, I sat down with Dr. Lorraine Smith McDonald to talk about moral injury and first responders. Moral injury happens when experience clashes with your values, your meaning, your identity, who you are as a person. And it can build slowly over time, call after call, moral tug after moral tug. And my takeaway from this great conversation was moral injury isn't a deficit of courage. It's a conflict of meaning, of purpose, of who you are as a person. Naming it is part of the healing process. In episode 97, I sat down with psychiatrist Dr. Hector Rodriguez, and we talked about trauma, psychiatry, and the human connection in a way that felt really deeply respectful. He shared that healing happens in relationship, in safety. We talked about how stress can show up long before a crisis, sleep disruption, irritability, and disconnection. My takeaway from this conversation was you don't heal alone. Connection is part of the medicine. And in our final guest episode, episode 98, I sat down with Fire Captain Michael Sears. His story was a reminder that sometimes the strongest move is to take a knee. One idea that really stayed with me is rest isn't retreat, it's recalibration. My takeaway from this conversation was you don't have to run every mile at red line. Pause, breathe, and lead more from a grounded strength. These amazing guests that shared their wisdom with all of us shared a very common theme. Connection. Connection with self, connection with others, community. It all points back to meaningful connections that we build are the root of life and wellness. Now, as we look at season 4, episode 100 is a milestone I don't take lightly. For this episode, my family will be joining me, my wife of 30 years, and my 2 adult kids. We're going to talk openly about what it's really like for them growing up as firefighter kids and being the partner of someone who lived this life for decades. The highs, the lows, the missed birthdays, the pride and fear that came with the job. It's going to be honest, emotional, and meaningful. I can't wait for you to hear it. If this season gave you something, a new perspective, a sense of connection, or a moment where you felt seen, take a second to subscribe and share the show. You can connect with our community on Facebook, on LinkedIn, or join the email list so you never miss an episode. Your support helps these conversations reach the people who really need it the most. As we close out season 3, I want to say thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for showing up. And thank you for being willing to explore the human side of this great work we do. Season 4 is on its way. Until then, take care of yourself, take care of your people, and as always, stay well.
Thank you for tuning in to Beneath the Helmet. We hope that this podcast has provided you with valuable insights into the world of firefighters' health and wellness. Remember, caring for your physical, mental, and spiritual well-being is crucial to achieving optimal performance. Join us next time on Beneath the Helmet for more inspiring conversations. Until then, stay well.